This time, 2.5 years ago, when the platform first started, in May of 2022, one of my very first guests was Emeritus Professor Des Gorman. Des is an adjunct senior fellow at the New Zealand Initiative, as well as being a professor of medicine, or was, in the Faculty of Medical and Health Sciences at the University of Auckland. From 2005 to 2010, he was the head of the University's School of Medicine at Auckland. And he had a number of interests. I think he's been involved in over 300 publications from memory. A number of non-clinical interests include health design and funding, health workforce planning, development, all those sorts of things, as well as being a director of the New Zealand ACC, executive chairman of Health Workforce New Zealand, a member of the National Health Board. God, it goes on, you see. And he was on the government's Welfare Reform Group in 2009, 2010. Eminently qualified. He and Dr. Murray Horn, who was a former Secretary of the Treasury in this country, were two people who very early on in the piece said, do you know what? I think the government have got it wrong, and public sector officials as well, in how we are responding to the COVID pandemic in this country. And I think that was pretty much my first interview with Des on that particular issue. Where have they got it wrong? It have to be said that not only was the Gorman-Horn analysis a bit like, to be perfectly honest with you, in some quarters of the medical and public sector, like farting in church. Des, wasn't it really? But it would be fair to say it was not popular, and those views were shunted to one side. Well, how interesting, as the COVID inquiries come back. Yesterday, the Australian COVID inquiry came back, and it made a number of observations, but Professor Gorman joins us now. Lovely to have you on, and you must feel a degree of vindication as these reports from all over the world start to analyse various governments' responses.
Yeah, I mean, it would be very easy, Michael, I think, to feel to some degree a level of satisfaction that other people agreed with us. But my major sense is one of this was inevitable. I mean, it was so obvious, we thought, what the shortcomings were, that these sorts of conclusions we would regard as being inevitable, obvious, predictable, whatever.
Well, I mean, you're an expert. I've just read your background, and the reason I read your background is because you have a degree of expertise, not just academic, but also in terms of practicality, in terms of health planning. Murray Horn, for Pete's sake, Secretary of Treasury, you don't get more planning than that. Why were people like you and the views that you had, do you think, shunted to one side?
Yeah, very good question. And it didn't just happen here, Michael. Very clearly it happened in Australia to some extent as well. I think the fundamental engagement which changed the topography was the take-up of a role in leadership by politicians. I think it was that politicisation at the very beginning which led to a lack of willingness to engage in a breadth of ideas, because from that engagement by politicians came a need for the best in show, best in class, the envy of the world. And so very quickly we descended into a realm of jingoism, and that report from Australia today was still jingoistic. I mean, despite the fact we did so well, and look how well we did compared to others, what can we do to do better? There's still an undertone of jingoism in there. But anyway, jingoism, we had propaganda, and we had the media joining in that propaganda. So to a very large extent, the agenda became captured, and it became captured by political risk. And as you well know, given your background, political risk is compelling, compulsive, and overwhelming for those involved. So I think the point at which our management of COVID lost the ability to engage in a broader church of views was when it became heavily politicised, and it was governed on a daily basis by the Prime Minister herself. And at that point, at that point, I think the ability to interpose different points of view has gone.
So in essence, because politicians never like to admit they're wrong, and politicians always like to justify mistakes because otherwise it's seen as a form of weakness, were they to say, oh God, we've just overreacted a bit on that, sorry, we're going to have to readjust. You're suggesting that once they got on a path, they were condemned to complete the journey.
Well, I think once they got on that path, Michael, and the conventional media joined in as a fan club, and large tracts of academia similarly joined in as a fan club, and you had the public health community addressing this problem as if somehow it was purely a public health issue, then I think the government not only was trapped in its own rhetoric, but also to a very large extent is receiving a lot of reward for that rhetoric. I mean, the 2000 elections were a stunning, if you like, reward for their behaviour to that time.
Yeah. Listen, the other thing I just ask on a personal level is, I mean, listen, I don't understand how people like yourself were ignored and sidelined, but what were the practical consequences for you as an individual coming out with saying, listen, you've been caught with your pants down, you haven't got a plan, and this plan's just the wrong one. And by the way, for God's sake, don't let the politicians hear the messaging. What was the reaction that you personally received as a consequence?
You know, I'd have to say the most extreme reaction, Michael, came from my academic colleagues, and I'm embarrassed by their behaviour to this day. Many of them, including old classmates, actively lobbied the university's hierarchy to have me gagged. I got regular messages from the executive dean saying, oh, please don't say this and please don't say that. I mean, he was so apologetic and embarrassed by the whole process, but some of his senior academics were at him all day, every day, in terms of this guy's a rogue, he's not speaking on behalf of us. Well, of course I wasn't. No academic can speak on behalf of another academic. That's the whole point of academic freedom. They wrote to me, they sent me emails, they sent letters to the editor, and these were, I found, profoundly distressing, not because I'm sensitive to personal criticism, because it actually defiled the one thing that I've held sacred about academia, and that is the freedom of academic expression of thought. And so they were challenging the very reason why academia exists. I mean, no disrespect to you and your colleagues, but I didn't expect any different or better from much of the media. I didn't expect much or any better of much of the political class either, because when you consider those at the helm had as a characteristic straight from school to university to work for a politician to go into politics, most of them had no life experiences whatsoever. So it came as no surprise to me that they fell short. But the behaviour of my academic colleagues got right up my nose, because in fact I thought they denigrated the very reality of why academia exists.
Yeah, and those bridges won't be rebuilt in a hurry either, I can tell, Des. Listen, the question though is always, we can look back, and we will. We're still going through 2 inquiries now. I've no doubt that you and Murray have made submissions to, I assume you've made submissions to the first of the inquiries, yeah?
Yes, we have.
And you'll be probably making one to the second one as well, when the terms of reference are settled and the commissioners, etc. Can I ask a question of you, though? You make reference, and so does the Australian report yesterday, that essentially both countries were caught with their pants down. And you're saying, listen, it was foreseeable. There had been previous SARS and MERS outbreaks, which should have led you to believe that it was possible that a pandemic of this kind could be there. You did no planning. Can I ask you if you think in 2024 we're any further advanced on that?
Maybe slightly more insightful, Michael, but are we materially advanced in terms of resourcing and capability? Not really.